We all want something in life, a goal, a purpose, a victory we can point to and say, that meant something. Some of us work for it, some of us chase it, and then there are those who hunt it, obsessively, relentlessly, until nothing else exists. Today, I will be talking about one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, and a character who explores what it truly means to hunt for what you want, and the cost it has for a man obsessed with proving he has no weaknesses. Kraven grew up in a very cold household, but a privileged one, where strength and power were the only things that mattered. His parents, Russian noblemen, his father, a strict and powerful man, and his mother was a quiet and soft-spoken woman. Kraven, however, would idolize his father and so imitate the cruel and privileged way his father acted. Kraven would often beat his half-brother, Chameleon, and flaunt his wealth around, and that was until the Revolution kicked his family out of Russia and forced them to move to America. There, Kraven's family would be poor, his mother would go insane and take her own life, and his father would be cold and bitter and still preach of strength and true Russian power, but ended up drinking himself to death. After watching his family fall from wealth, Kraven rebuilt his identity and vowed to be richer and more powerful than his father ever was, and he actually did. But still, he could not get over his own personal demons. He would meet a Wakandan lady named Aja, who saw the hurt and pain in Kraven and tried to teach Kraven about the ways of peace. They would go to Africa, and her attempts to make Kraven find self-peace weren't going well at all. He still didn't understand what it meant to be among the animals and not to hunt and just find this inner peace that he was just so missing. So in a last-ditch effort, she let Kraven do a Wakandan ritual that would give the user inner peace and find oneself and also give them powers. But Kraven couldn't finish this ritual because peace requires acceptance, and Kraven refused to let go of his past. Instead of healing, the ritual gave him enhanced powers, and he used those powers to sharpen his obsession, and he would become Kraven the Hunter. His half-brother Chameleon would contact him to hunt down Spider-Man, and he didn't take the offer because he liked Chameleon and owed him a favor. Rather, he just wanted another opportunity to prove himself that him alone was the best and only hunter. That's one thing about Kraven, is he's constantly pushing himself and molding himself into the perfect hunter. And in order to be the perfect hunter, you can't have any weaknesses, you can't have any fear, and you can't have any equals. Seeing Spider-Man as a challenge, Kraven would try to hunt down Spider-Man over and over again, never being able to put Spider-Man down forever, which takes a toll on him. Kraven's identity and self-value comes from his abilities and his strengths. Like I said, growing up in a household where power is everything, so Spider-Man always beating him left him in a spot where he couldn't be the greatest if he had an equal. And hunters don't passively follow their prey. They stalk them. They think about them. They obsess over them until they are defeated, which leads to Kraven's last hunt. It starts off with Kraven explaining that he's honed his body. He's been constantly growing and becoming better, and yet he has two weaknesses: Spider-Man and time. There's something so interesting about this comic and the conversation it tries to have. Kraven, who has spent his whole life trying to find no weaknesses, trying to be honorable and find true strength, he's just like everyone else, and his biggest struggle is time. So Kraven grapples with this weakness and his death, which is the most human thing we've ever seen Kraven do. Kraven plans to hunt down Spider-Man, then end his own life. Not because he is sick, not because he's going to die soon, but because he doesn't want to see himself become weak. He doesn't want to allow himself the shame of not being the best. But he won't end his life without first killing Spider-Man. He captures Spider-Man, shoots him, and buries Spider-Man and begins to wear his suit and take up the mantle of Spider-Man, to prove that not only was he stronger than Spider-Man, but he's better than him in all aspects. As he tries to be Spider-Man, we see that he isn't satisfied by just wearing the suit, but he wants to be him as much as possible. So he drinks this herbs and poison and all this weird stuff and try to push him closer to being that Spider-Man. But when he's doing this, he's questioning himself constantly. We get to see his inner dialogue, and we get to see that Kraven is questioning his father and his ideals, and he's just struggling with his whole life, struggling between seeing his father as this god, or what he really was, a Russian man who lost everything and drunk himself to death. And this is really a huge thing for him because he idolized himself off of what his father was. So if his father was nothing, then that means Kraven was really nothing the whole time. And we see Kraven just constantly going over these thoughts and just trying to figure out who he is. And as Kraven's struggling with this inner dialogue, we see that for the first time, he's afraid. He's actually scared because everything up to this point might have been meaningless. And not being satisfied by being Spider-Man and easily stopping criminals, he sees one last test for himself. The last challenge to prove that he is superior to Spider-Man, which is defeating an enemy Spider-Man could never defeat, which is Vermin. So Kraven goes into the sewers and beats him up and proves that he is superior. And just as he finishes beating up Vermin and takes him back to his hideout, we see that Spider-Man digs himself out of the grave and meets Kraven. And Kraven doesn't even want to fight Spider-Man, but he wants to show Spider-Man that in all ways he won. He could have killed him, but he didn't. He would rather show Spider-Man that he's the best and he's undefeated. And once Kraven proves himself that he's achieved his shallow goals, he has nothing to live for. His life has simply peaked. He became richer than his father. He gained more honor. He hunted everything that he could, and he got everything he ever wanted. And he ended his own life. So when I look at this story, and when I look at Kraven, I see two things. Kraven's greatest strength. Kraven represents this negative belief that many people have, including myself, that your value comes from what you're able to prove. We live in a world where what you can do, how much money you make, and what makes you unique gives you value. So if you are someone who doesn't fit into these main categories, then you're seen as less than. Kraven lived by this rule, striving to prove himself to the world that he alone was on the top. And in some aspects, I kind of envy his simplicity and the audacity he has to go for what he wants. He wants something, he goes for it. Someone says he can't do it, he proves them wrong and does it. And he doesn't allow himself to have any weaknesses, proving to himself that the only limits he has is the ones that he wants. And my envy comes from that mindset, the hunter mindset, to stalk something until you have it. And I'm constantly trying to work on that. My own self-doubt gets in the way a lot. Instead of seeing these moments of weakness as opportunity to prove myself my strength, I run from the issue. Instead of seeing the impossible and showing everyone that I could do it, I quietly agree and dismiss myself from the opportunity. Seeing these moments and these struggles as a risk with no reward, instead of allowing myself these moments to push myself even further. I want to become a hunter. I want to be like Kraven. And for a while, this is easy, working hard for a goal and actually doing it. But like Kraven, we often struggle with the next thing. We often find ourselves in a plateau in which the value we had in ourselves goes down because we aren't growing, making us constantly anxious and depressed because we aren't seeing results. And we also start these goals for the wrong reasons. Kraven built his life on a broken past. He never moved on from the fall of his family and the shame that he felt from becoming broke and poor and seeing his wealthy family go to nothing. Becoming so obsessed with his hunt that he never actually grows. He got stronger, sure. He got money, but all those things never satisfied the emptiness inside of him. These plateaus and goals made out of hurt can destroy a person. Struggling to find value in your life and constantly trying to prove others wrong will never lead to happiness. Which leads to point 2. Kraven's greatest weakness. Kraven's greatest weakness wasn't time or Spider-Man, but in his goals and self-image. He wanted to be the best, and once he achieved it, there was nothing left for him but weakness. His ideology was built on short-term physical goals, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they aren't something to be a constant. No one is going to be the best at something forever, and what defines strength isn't physical challenges in front of us, but rather the quiet moments where we're left to our own thoughts. Kraven wasn't strong enough to challenge himself beyond what he had known his whole life. He wasn't strong enough to look inside himself and face true things that held him back. He thought by playing the part and having the feats of being the greatest hunter that he would finally not feel so empty. But even after everything, he never gained substance. And in the quiet moments where he struggled with his own thoughts and these feelings that he had, he lost those battles. And that's exactly why the story hits so hard. Kraven isn't hunting Spider-Man. He's hunting validation. He's hunting the one thing he can't capture: peace within himself. Because for people like Kraven, strength isn't about survival. It's about identity. It's about proving something even if you don't know who you're proving it to anymore. And like Kraven, you'll be tempted to believe that your worth depends on what you can prove. But it doesn't. Your value isn't earned. You already have it. What you chase, your goals, those are for you, not for validation, not to silence doubt, but to build who you are becoming. So what is strength? In this story, we see two men fighting with the ideology of strength and weakness. Kraven is fighting and killing Spider-Man, and he tries to show his strength while Peter is struggling on the verge of death, 6 feet under in a coffin. Kraven proves that his strength does have limits, and that you can have all the power that you want, that you can live up to this false idea of who you are, and that the greatest victories will still leave you empty. Peter crawls his way out of the grave, not with his strength, but with his willpower. So what does this all mean? Kraven is the greatest hunter, but he's not the strongest man. And what does this mean for you? The hardest battles aren't what people see, but if you go towards your goals, inch by inch, you can achieve them. But your value doesn't come from what you can do. You already have value. What you do every day, what you work for, is just so you can prove to yourself that you can do it, not for anyone else. You are worthy and you have value. So crawl out of your grave. Your life isn't over. The world needs you. And don't try to be the greatest hunter. Just try to be the greatest you. Talk to you later, guys.